Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Patient First Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Bryan Laskin. And as always, I'm excited that you're here. And we have a great guest today. I'm excited to have Austin Hare, who's gone from professional wakeboarder to real estate investor to American Ninja Warrior. He's the host of the commercial Real Estate Secrets podcast, a show that focuses on helping healthcare organizations scale by interviewing successful entrepreneurs and diving into actionable strategies. Leaders Real Estate helps all types of healthcare organizations grow by developing creative real estate strategies, identifying the best locations, and providing capital for building purchases. Austin, thanks so much for being on the pod.
My pleasure, man. Yeah, it's exciting to be here.
Yeah, as I was reading your intro, I was thinking, I've wakeboarded before and I'm horrible. Real estate investment, I do quite a bit. But I am probably not at all qualified to be an American Ninja Warrior. So you do a lot of things. And how's your journey been to be talking to dentists? And you are a repeat guest on the Patient First podcast. So thanks for that. But how did you get here?
Yes, like you've had like several different significant pivots in your life. I like to call it like Austin 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, even 4.0, because I've had the same thing. So I started wakeboarding when I was 12, got really into health and fitness as a result because I had to stay really healthy. And as I was getting older, I realized that I would have to transition out of that at some point because I couldn't rely on my body to be my source of income. And so I opened up some fitness centers, which is how I got into the site selection process. So I was doing, there's this franchise, this kickboxing fitness franchise. We're doing a handful of locations. And I was like, as my wakeboarding was winding down, those were winding up. And also in the background, I bought my first property after reading Rich Dad Poor Dad in 2011. So I was doing what you would call house hacking. So I was like living there and I lived in the master bedroom and I rented out the other rooms, and I was making money to live in this. It was a pretty cool house, like second story view of the lake and pool and a hot tub and all this kind of stuff. And I just got lucky because it was 2011. I happened to be 23 at age 2011. I was in became a home buying territory. And it's not like I really can say I was a genius in that level, but that kind of got me to introduced to real estate. So meanwhile, I'm still wakeboarding. I'm opening up these fitness centers, and I like real estate. And so what happened was I was ready to do my fourth location, and I had worked with different brokers in the past, and they'd always just showed me some locations. Hey, what's your gut feeling? Blah, blah, blah. And so for this one, I was actually working with my now partner. That's how we got introduced. And he ran a really in-depth like competition demographic analysis. And so I was thinking in my head, oh, I got to go to Winter Park because I live in Orlando. And so Winter Park is like the cool, sexy area. And I want to stay away from Kissimmee because these demographics are garbage. And after running the analysis, we found, hey, Winter Park is super saturated. Rents are really high and it's full of competition. And Kissimmee is like wide open. It was like the Kissimmee Lake Nona area. And man, that just goes to show you like you gut feel doesn't always work out. You just can't make good decisions without good data. And so I actually ended up getting in a disagreement with the franchisor and sold the locations in 2019, thankfully. Sold them right before COVID hit. And then my partner invited me to start working with him full time. So I had retired from wakeboarding in 2017, really focused on the gyms for about 2 years to maximize them, was able to sell those. I had them for 6, focused on them for 2, sold those. And then my partner invited me to start working with him. And then at the time we sat down and it was like, hey, he had been doing healthcare for like about 12 years, 11 years at the time. And we could do anything. It's which asset of real estate, which asset class do we want to be in? And we decided healthcare because it's recession resistant, now proved to be pandemic resistant and inflation resistant. And so I started working with him to bring in clients on the site selection part, but really also at the same time, we started getting into buying and developing our own real estate. And the story behind that is he had spent about a couple years looking for a location for a hospital back to urgent care he was working with. And finally, this awesome location popped up and he presented it to the urgent care. They liked it. However, the landlord decided he wanted to sell the building. So he has an awesome creditworthy tenant and he doesn't want to lease to them. He only wants to sell. And so the whole deal fell through. And my partner's just saying, this is crazy. Like we brought you all this value by bringing in the tenant. And like you didn't even want to capitalize on that. Why don't we just start buying the real estate? So that's what we've been doing. So we've been buying real estate when groups are not able to, especially like larger groups are scaling pretty fast. It's really hard to buy the real estate, so we'll partner with them. But yeah, that is the story of how we got into site selection and purchasing real estate for healthcare.
That's great. Yeah, I've worked for like this. I've worked for a couple groups now who typically they don't own the real estate too, like you said. And it blows my mind. In fact, when I sold my practices, like I maintained the real estate that we had, which has been great. And those are two very important topics. I think we should probably separate them a little bit, like site selection and then investing in the real estate.
Yes.
Because my main practice has been in three locations, and I was in a garbage strip mall at the end, then in a medical center and buried in a medical center, and then its own freestanding 8,000 square foot building.
8,000
And
square feet is so big, by the way. That's awesome that you're doing that.
yeah, I know we had five general dentists, oral surgeon, orthodontist. It's a big, but but more than the square footage, the visibility and the where but I did not do what you should do, which is what you said. I was not like, where's gonna be the easy spot or look at the data analytics. I was just like, that's where I want to be. And that corner is easy to get to with ample parking, which I suppose is part of the data. But in retrospect, if I were to open a practice or buy a practice, I would certainly be looking at the data. So can you speak a little bit about the importance of the site selection?
Yeah. So it's very situational. Like it depends on each individual group, each practice, what the business model is. Some people take Medicare or Medicaid. Some people are PPO and private pay, whatever. But that being said, regardless of which particular path you choose, it is really important to know what are the demographics like of the site that you're choosing. And we like to use the grocer anchor demographics, like grocer anchor studies for all of our competition and demographic analysis because they've actually got the most accurate data. There are other companies out there that, for instance, we used to use Buxton, but Buxton relies on census data, which that was 12 or 14 years ago. So they're having to extrapolate and guess a lot into the future of what it's like right now. We like to rely on different models that we use and subscription services that we use to pull the grocery anchor data because it's very accurate. And so, in a nutshell, what we're doing is finding where where's the highest concentration of grocery stores that have the most similar patient base to you. It doesn't, maybe it's Whole Foods, sure, but maybe it's Walmart, right? Like it's just, again, it depends on your business model. So we're going to layer that out and then we're going to figure out where is the most competition. So some groups, like, especially if you're a general practice, that does have the most competition, but like some of the specialties, they're going to have a lot less competition. But they might even like being closer to general practices because that's a referral source for them. Whatever it is, right? We're going to lay out another layer of the competition. So we stack those two layers on top of each other. Then we just say, hey, where are the most amount of ideal patients already going? And where is the least amount of competition? And then once we have that, we start looking into where we can find individual locations. And so, like you referenced earlier, it's always good to go where the best location is for the business. And some people want to buy the real estate. And if so, that's great. It's going to limit your options. But if you're looking at the best location for the business, then maybe it's for lease, probably is for lease, but there's a small chance it's for sale, right? Like the deal that we talked about earlier, like somebody has to buy it. So I think we always recommend people to be like with an open mind. Don't try and pigeonhole yourself into a situation where you have to buy the real estate, even if it's not the best spot.
So how do you make that decision? If that's the second part, like site selection is one thing. The other is whether or not you should own the real estate that you're looking at.
Yeah. So I think what we've noticed is a lot of people take for granted how much time commitment is required to purchasing and managing real estate. I think in large part because it's been dubbed as like the passive income industry. And so what we've noticed happening is people are like, oh, if I'm renting, I'm throwing my money away. Like I gotta own. And the thing is, there's a portion of your rent every month that goes towards the principal pay down, yeah. But there's also a lot of other expenses that are tied up with the rent and the mortgage that are not necessarily part of increasing equity in the building. So it's not quite an apples to apples comparison. So to answer your question, I think like it really just depends on where's going to be the best place for your business. And so if you do want to own real estate, that's our business, right? We think it's great. Our personal recommendation would be if you're not able to buy the real estate for your business, like in this case, a dental practice, then use that capital you're going to use for the down payment and invest in another building, invest in another project somewhere, right? Put your capital to use somewhere else. You will oftentimes get a better return on that down payment. That's the thing. I think people look at it in a vacuum too much. So if I rent, then I'm throwing my money away. If I own it, then I'm investing. It's no, like there are significant capital expenditures required when you purchase real estate. So the question is like, what else would you do with that capital? Now, I think it's great to be able to have that option. If you find a building that is perfect for you and it checks all your boxes and it's for sale, then absolutely, like those are ones that you should buy. It's just, it's not really worth it, in my opinion, to sacrifice the quality of the business because we look at rent as a factor of your marketing too. With digital ads, like those are auction platforms. The price is only going to go up. at least with your rent, you're locked in, right? So if you have a 2%, 3% annual rent bump, like, and that's part of your marketing, chances are you're actually going to be paying less than if you were to have to offset that cost with a digital marketing campaign. And I'm not saying don't do that. I'm just saying balance those two equations. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. And one last question, which I think will be a bit maybe a complicated lead up. I've been doing some lecturing, and in one lecture I came out with, I was talking about how the average dental practice has 1,500 patients, and the average operatory can service about 500 patients on average. And let's say you're getting 50 new patients a month, even if you're losing 10 new patients a month or so, you should be adding an operatory every single year. But I think what happens is that oftentimes people are like, I have 4 operatories and I'm busy, so I'm good. And then they're stuck and they don't know what to do next. And then it becomes a self-limiting on your business. Whereas
Hmm.
if you would open another operatory, oh, and I would guess that this is a problem that you help solve. I've not talked to a dentist that I can remember that's regretted adding an operatory at all or expanding the size of their practice because there is this sort of, I think, self-limiting aspect of people's physical space.
Hmm.
So what would you say to somebody who's listening that's practice has had the same 6 chairs for the last 10 years? I probably could use more. How should I what's the next step I should do to figure out how to move my facility or expand? Or because I just see I've never heard anybody said I did this too early, right?
Yeah.
They're always doing it too late.
Yeah, especially better than most coming from a place with 8,000 square feet. Most practices that we work with are 2,000 to maybe 4,000. So yeah, you're proof that you can keep expanding and growing. And yeah, I think that when it comes to deciding, am I going to expand or am I going to relocate, Kate, that's something that you want to do it right. The build out costs are really high. The relocation costs are really high. There's no beating around the bush with that. So I think the first step is doing an analysis of your current area, right? There's a couple things like, are you in a medical office plaza? Are you really recessed from the main road? Are you already in a retail plaza? Are you getting good visibility? Are you in a retail plaza that's maybe like lost its prestige over the years? Maybe it's like a little bit more run down. People have vacated. Is there vacancies around you? You know what I'm saying? Like in 10 years, demographics can change in a certain area. So I think the first step is like figuring out what the demographics are like where you're currently at. And then that prove this argument that it's time to move. And then, yeah, we can start to look at a bigger space. And so, even if you are in a good area, if you're just bursting at the seams, there's, in my opinion, two options. Like you can relocate to a bigger place, or maybe it's time to do practice at your second location, one or the other. But then that's just going to involve, yeah, figuring out, okay, we're going to do a study and figure out exactly where to go. Like we were talking off camera earlier, the problem right now is just like inflation, interest rates, even though those are coming down, they're still elevated. Cost of labor, land, everything is really high. And so, because a lot of dental practices are not going out of business, it's hard to find second generation space, which means like you have to develop a new space a lot of times. And then most developers want to do do not want to do multi tenant buildings because it's riskier, right? Like if I can develop a 3,000 square foot place for you, but I have a solid tenant. Why do I want to develop a 10,000 square foot where I got to go find the other 7,000? I got to fill that other 7,000 square feet, right? A lot of people shy away from that. So what we've been working on is just building our relationships with other retailers outside of the healthcare space to help bring those costs down. So we've been doing deals with Panda and Starbucks and AutoZone and some Chipotle's. And so the idea is we can do if a group wants to relocate or start their second location and we got to do a development, we can bring in some of those retail guys to pay retail rents. And then we can keep the healthcare users rent a little bit lower to be more affordable and still make it a deal so that everybody wins.
Great. So where can people go if they would like to have either a site visit, a plan, start a
I'm,
real
I'm,
estate?
I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. So my name's Austin, like the city, hair like on your head. LinkedIn is probably the easiest place to reach out to me. If for some reason you don't have LinkedIn or social media, just shoot me an email. It's ahair, so A Austin Hair, at leadersre.com. So that's RE as in real estate.
Great. Austin, thanks again for being on the podcast. Great information.
Hey, my pleasure.